Hello there, Christian Anarchist is back, and I can't believe what just happened on Twitter. See, sometimes you try to talk with people, they end up blocking you once you talk one-on-one. Story is that an exchange on Twitter between a friend of mine and Ricky Gervais occurred, and they were talking about supposed contradictions in the Bible. Once there, some man by the name of Alin claimed that he won't acknowledge men who preach condemnation. So I, of course, would respond and chime in with a tweet acknowledging that, Jesus, the old usual, was also a preacher of this same kind of condemnation that he likewise is supposedly condemning here. However, I moved the conversation to messages instead, so I can't show you what we said, but I will say it took him one day to block me after I asked him a couple of questions. So to begin, Alin was a universalist, and he hates religion, even though the Epistle of James preaches of pure religion being that of Christ. He also believes in universal salvation and affirms the all-saved at once view compared to the universal reconciliation view amongst universalists like Wade, who was the universalist that I debated with on this particular topic. So several things came up, but I'll go over two of them, since that's what they eventually led up to. Whenever we talked about the parts of Jesus preaching about hell, he'd say, well, who was in charge of the Bible? How do you know you have what was originally written down? Well, because the manuscript evidence we have contained the verses in which Jesus talks about condemnation with really not much textual variance in these verses, as well as just simply that the Old and New Testament have been preserved through the manuscript tradition, especially the New Testament, which has several copies in earliest periods to demonstrate that what we have is not much different than our Bible today.
The average classical Greek writer has less than 20 copies of his work still in existence, and frankly, that's an extremely high estimate. You only have a handful of Greek authors who have 20 copies, handwritten copies of their texts that still exist. But I like to use that number because when I debate skeptics, they can't dispute it at all. You stack these up, and they'd be about 4 feet high, so it'd come up right up to the podium. Now, how high do you think the stack of New Testament manuscripts would be? Let's not count the quotations from fathers. I have no idea how to do that. But let's look at the Greek texts and versions, just like we are with these classical authors. Might be as tall as my head, you think? A little taller than that? Maybe as tall as the ceiling? Some of you are skeptical. Well, here's what it looks like. This is going to take all day. Yeah, it's a little better. Maybe there's more New Testament. Oh, here we go. Some more manuscripts. That's getting there. That looks pretty good. That's as much as I can do in PowerPoint. You multiply that stack by 8, and it's going to be more than 1 mile high. The New Testament manuscripts, compared to classical authors, 4 feet, over 1 mile high. We have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to the text. And when we talk about that, here's the thing you need to understand. Skeptics will say, how can you possibly tell what the New Testament originally said? It's been translated and copied so many times, we don't know. Yes, but we're not relying just on the latest versions of it. We can go back in time, and we can see earlier copies, and we can see many, many, many copies. If we're going to be skeptical about what the New Testament originally said, that skepticism, on average, needs to be multiplied at least 1,000 times for any other classical Greek or Latin author.
So by the graphics that I am showing, it's easy to see that what we have of the New Testament is what every historian or textual scholar would like to have for famous works such as for Josephus and Tacitus. We were given a vast majority that survived over the years, and it's very amazing that we are able to have these manuscripts. In fact, it is a privilege to have these amounts that are able to help us find out what was in the original. Next, we talked about whether it was right or just for God to judge people and for him to be a God who, as Psalms chapter 5 verse 5 says, hates evildoers, and as Nahum chapter 1 verse 2 says, that he is jealous as well as wrathful. So when he once said that only Satan could be a god of wrath, I decided to leave the topic since he refused to advance on the subject. I instead decided to issue the question of morality instead and ask, how can you know right and wrong? He says this is based upon government and civil laws, is that we are able to know right and wrong. So to start the conversation, I asked then, okay, how do you know if rape and pedophilia is wrong? After this, of course, he would say that I'm a troll and would block me as a result. All because I asked a genuine and honest question to wonder about his worldview. It just goes to show that once you stick to the topic and you question people about their inconsistent worldview, as well as we see some of their tweets even imply that they just want an echo chamber with no room for criticism of their own view while wanting to practice their desire to attack on other views, it seems like we come to the conclusion that people like Alin do not desire to engage in free thought or intellectual discussions, but instead enter a dogma debate that focuses on not questioning what you believe and demanding it to be left alone. This is the kind of medieval thinking that's kept us in the Dark Ages, and if you follow Alin's line of thinking, then you will take us to the Dark Ages. Simply put, Alin is not confident in his universalism view, and if he has to say he doesn't wish to debate it, or say that it doesn't matter, so let's not talk about it, then, we'll have to be at the beginning of an age that will rob itself from an intellectual freedom to question and reason for truth. This has been The Christian Anarchist. Have a good day.